would indicate that Dr. Ben, in his concern for the need in the black community for cultural and ideological structures and unity, which is obviously a laudable and praiseworthy goal, then proceeds to redefine Jewish history and biblical history in a way which may be conducive to his political view, but does violence to history.
By the way, I have to let the rabbi know I'm much as a Jew as he is. Born of a Jewish mother, a Yemenite grandmother, a Yemenite Puerto Rican mother, Ethiopian Hebrew father, Beta Israel, by the way, they call us Falasha for whatever their reasons. Thus, I am as much a Jew as the rabbi or the grand rabbi in Israel, any of the grand rabbis in Israel. Is the rabbi stating here that in the book of Genesis, there is no mention of the extermination, and I use the word genocide, of the 7 tribes of the Amalekites, the Hittites, the Moabites, the Jebusites. He in his own statement stated that this is ameliorated somewhat in the book of Samuel. Everybody saw that. But the book of Samuel doesn't change the book of Genesis. And we remember that Genesis wasn't written first. It was Exodus. It's at the Council of Jamia that they decided to write Genesis. Next, since there is no Jewish race, you know, you have Indian Jews from India, from Kashim Jews, look like any Indian. You have ourselves from Ethiopia. By the way, the rabbi wouldn't forget that it says Moses married the daughter of the high priest of Ethiopia, or Cush. Being a rabbi, he will know this. Second, moreover, about the bar mitzvah, and I went through one like the rabbi went through one at around the same period of time, is the rabbi saying that the bar mitzvah is not a commitment to the people? Isn't the Torah demanding? And I don't talk about the Talmud. Talmud is not Torah. The Torah is supposed to have been written by God or passed down, although it was in fact written at the Sanhedrin. The theory, the mythology, the allegories that it's written by God or passed down by Moses, again, is a myth. That's Jewish mythology, because Moses is dead in around 1196 before the Christian era, whereas the Sanhedrin doesn't release a thing called the Torah until about 700 before the Christian era, which was written from 700 before the Christian era to 500. It took 200 years. There's a commitment in anybody, that any child that's been bar mitzvah, and when he's talking about circumcision of women, that is strictly Western, and it has nothing to do with orthodoxy. They're using the word orthodoxy to mean something. There's never been a circumcision. It can't be a circumcision of girls. But anyhow, let us continue. The point is that in the bar mitzvah, it commits the boy. If you commit yourself to the community, there's a call to return to Israel. There's a call that every child, I went through it, that you must come back to Israel. If that isn't a fact, the rabbi can say what he wants. His position of, or the ADL, position of fear of this, then let's look at the behavior. It's just like saying today, you know, one time the rabbi, I don't know personally, but the ADL and all the other Jewish organizations one time didn't even recognize that we exist as Falashas. It is something in America. American Jews have decided that they're going to speak for all Jews. And not only for all Jews. You remember they said blacks and Jews. I'm black and Jewish. You're white and Jewish. You're European. You're of European Jewish ancestry. I'm African Jewish ancestry. No more claim to Israel than I have, because there's no Jewish race. Okay, let me continue. The rabbi he says that Abraham, he points to Judaism coming from Abraham. Then I said that the rabbi obviously have not read the 10 Commandments and their source. Moses is not until about 1346 before the Christian era, 49 years after the death of Amenhotep IV, otherwise known as Akhenaten. Every one of those 12 so-called commandments, and that Moses is supposed to have gotten at Mount Sinai. By the way, Mount Sinai is still in Egypt, in Africa, hasn't gone any place. Now, those 10 commandments weren't gotten by Moses. Because I'm Jewish don't mean that I have to follow the mythology. When you go in any of the major tombs in Egypt, you find those 10 commandments plus 32 more, otherwise referred to as the negative confession. Am I to believe that Moses was born in Mizraim, Egypt, about 1346 before the Christian era, went to school there, become a priest, at age 85 or around there, decided that somebody mistreated his people, and that in every school in Egypt, you had to recite the negative confession, 42 laws, of which they said, I have not killed man or woman, I have not stolen this, I have not, every one of the so-called 10 commandments is already stated. That Moses didn't see it. I would like the rabbi to tell me, where does it show that Abraham taught any of this? I would like the rabbi to tell me, before circumcision in Egypt, where did the Jews have circumcision? They said that Abraham's circumcision is part of what made him Jewish. Then the rabbi must tell me, the worship of the golden calf, which they call the golden calf, isn't that the worship of Hathor, the goddess Hathor? We could go on down.
But it's rather common knowledge and Jewish practice of centuries that there is a set cycle of the reading of the Torah and the Haftorah, and bar mitzvah children under no circumstances are in a position to pick and choose their Torah portions. Their portions are part of the set calendar prescription of which portions of the Torah progressively are to be read on a given Shabbat, a Saturday morning. So that even on this factual level, there's a disturbing lack of accuracy in your presentation.
Wait, European Jews don't run Judaism. You don't make Judaism. Among the Palashas, among the Jews from Kashim Jews, we pick. You see, Judaism is run by you. You don't set the standard for Judaism.
So now we're in the process of a double standard of selection. You have indicated in your transcript that this is what occurs in American synagogues.
It does too.
By indicating that Jewish children make this statement of loyalty to Israel. Yet when I clarify your misstatement about how Torah readings are selected, you tell me, well, there are other practices aside from the practice here, which may indeed be true. One example being the triennial cycle of the reading of the Torah. But then you can't take the American example and then selectively learn from it something that you choose from another context.
The Jewish child doesn't read the entire sermon of the period. He does select a section within that period. That's all I said. The child doesn't read the entire book or the entire thing that is going to be said on that particular Shabbat. The child has a section within it he reads.
And there are indeed many synagogues, especially in the Orthodox community, in which the entire section is indeed the entire parsha.
So then you're admitting that there is divergence between the Jewish synagogue right here in America?
Within the prescripted calendar structure of readings.
All I said is that the child is allowed to pick out. You're saying in the Orthodox, in certain Orthodox, not all, the child must read the entire thing. I'm saying that the child is allowed to pick out a section. What is wrong with that?
According to your transcript, and I won't take the time to find the exact words unless it's required, you make a statement that the child may pick out sections and you use the term Isaiah or from whatever.
Depending on the period of time in which we are.
Depending if Isaiah is indeed part of the text.
Who said not? I mean, you just brought in other words, I said exactly what you're saying, that the child is allowed to pick out that section. Let's say that we're reading the book of Isaiah now, or we're reading the book of Hosea. The child is allowed to pick out of Isaiah a certain section, or the child is allowed in Hosea if we are reading at that particular time, because all the children don't make bar mitzvah in the same month and at the same time.
One should be clear, however, that that's partially accurate, because part liturgically of what a child is expected to read or participate in, if possible, is the reading from the Torah itself. Indeed, the reading from the Haftorah is a significantly later development, precisely because if a child is a bar mitzvah, is a son of the commandments, then one of his first public possible acts is being called up to the public reading of the Torah.
Right.
And it's by this act that his reaching adulthood is publicly declared. If I may, however, go on to what I think.
Wait, let's settle this before we move on, and then I'll be happy to let you...
because there were some other points that I think should be
we're going to try to get into all of
mentioned.
that. Your response, Dr. Ben.
The point is, everyone, I stated, is adulthood. The question is not when does he do this, if he's a man or a child, because assume, I already stated, the Torah would be similar in essence to the confirmation of the Christians. when the child comes of a certain age and take up his manhood, in order to be able to sit in the minyan, to sit in the official congregation as a young man, he has to come and go for the bar mitzvah before he could sit in the minyan, you know.
Okay.
Now, he doesn't deny that. All I'm saying, and which he can't refute, he's saying about later changes. I don't care what the changes, if it's later or earlier. The fact is that they do it.
It's a very curious kind of contextual oversimplification here. On the one hand, Dr. Ben correctly points out certain instances of Egyptian historical input in what we today call the religion of the Hebrews and later Judaism. And no one can deny the role of cultural and historical context. On the other hand, given it would seem your political need to view all through the African perspective, you completely ignore the experience of the Code of Hammurabi, of the Mesopotamian sources of law, which appear significantly modified in later Torah development. What I'm suggesting is that, on the one hand, it is a strange scholarly position to argue that historical context must be accounted for in the development of Judaism, which I would accept, and then argue, however, that only that political context which is useful to your present political view is to be noted and is acceptable. As I read the transcript, as I read the transcript here, there is a comment here that says, and permit me to paraphrase loosely, that Judaism and all of Judaism and the Jewish people come from Egypt, therefore they are African, and therefore there is a statement later on that many blacks do not understand that they are indeed Jews. Now that raises to us a very curious question: why the constant need to inject a racial quota into a diverse historical context, which we would acknowledge, but yet on the other hand, as we sit here having watched Operation Moses and the ingathering of Ethiopian Jews into Israel, why then the need to define by race as what is essentially authentic in Judaism strikes us as a contradiction that at least can possibly be interpreted in terms of current political context, but certainly not by history.
All right.
Dr. Ben? I'm glad that you brought that last point, so I work from the last forward or backwards. Isn't it strange that just yesterday that the Jews in America found out that they are black Jews? Isn't it strange also that you don't consider us Jews, because when we go to Israel, you're still demanding that we must, quote unquote, reconvert. Who said we converted in the first place? Who said, what right have European Jews, who don't belong there either, have a right to tell us and to carry us through a shameful...
I'm sorry, European Jews who what?
No,
who don't have a...
any more than we do. Because the Russian Jews come there, many of them not circumcised, many of them never have a bar mitzvah, and we had to go, nobody asked them to reconvert. We had to go there, and a farce called circumcision, and the, you know, I wanted to use the Hebrew word, but at the moment. And we're supposed to go through all that. Next thing, Rabbi, how come my uncle, Tamarat Emanuel, came here in 1935 to raise money when Italy invaded Ethiopia? We were 5 million. When we left, we were 50,000. The Jewish community in America refused, denied that we existed. Up to now in Israel, you have 2 Grand Rabbi at least, the Sephardic Grand Rabbi and the Ashkenazi Grand Rabbi, the European Grand Rabbi, that refused to recognize that we're even Jews. Only the Sephardic Grand Rabbi started with Obadiah Yosef when he was the chief rabbi. Now let's go back. So that it's a farce about Israel telling us to come there for whatever the reason. In that, Israel to this day, from 1947, have in the Knesset a petition for the acceptance of Jews from Ethiopia, the right to return. To this day, it has not been approved. It has still been tabled every year. Now, so that you try to show the liberality of white American Jews when it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist at all. Because if you're saying that you're bringing us back, then we should go back as Jews. not as something that you're going to make us over there. Who give you the authority to say who is a Jew and who isn't a Jew? You talk about my desire for the political aristocracy, my political sense. Well, it was obvious that no one questions European Jews. Am I to believe that European Jews don't have a white politics here? When blacks move into a Jewish neighborhood, white Jewish neighborhood, doesn't the white Jew move like the white Christian? I mean, doesn't the white Jew have white flight to the suburb? Now, so as a Jew, are you saying that I should behave as a Jew, period, in the United States, that means white Jew, in the United States, and run from the blacks? And when I come here, my acceptance in Judaism isn't the same as when you come. When you come, if you came as a white Jew, and the white Jews, and you deal with whites. Now, I'm a black Jew, isolated from Judaism by virtue of that, because of my blackness. When I go into a synagogue, most synagogue I go into, the first thing they tell me, and I say I'm Jew, when you become Jew, did your parents convert? When? You don't ask a white person walk into the synagogue and say that. Go back about the Jews learning the Hammurabi Code. When you talk about Hammurabi Code, you're talking about 2000 BC, just the other day, historically speaking. The concept of one God didn't come from Moses nor Hammurabi. Akhenaten preached one God before Moses was born. The Aaron and about their being African. If you're born in America, you are an American Jew, wouldn't you say? Now, where was Aaron born? Where was Moses born? And Sarah, Aaron's sister, and all of them, Miriam. Where were all of this supposed to be happening before the Jews come in contact again as a group? Not Moses, not Abraham alone and his little family. From Abraham and excluding Joseph, from then on, according to Torah, for approximately 400 years, everything the Jews learned was in Egypt, everything. Because from the time of Joseph, Genesis ends, and Moses died. And there came a time when Joseph died, because of this bad Pharaoh that came, who knew not Joseph. From then on, we had to hear about the plight of the Jewish people and so forth. But before that, from the time of Potiphar, all the way down to the Exodus, isn't it everything the Jew learned was in there? It was no Hammurabi Code. And I said the basic foundation of Judaism, one God and all that, came out of Africa. Egypt is still there, not in the Middle East.
Again, I wouldn't want to deny for a moment that Egypt was part of the cultural mix, and therefore Africa, as you would want to make the political point. But to selectively ignore all other historical factors to then be able to make a political point is not to be dismissed as a cry of anti-Semitism when it's raised, but is to be called for inaccuracy in the historical record. And one has an absolute right to do that when that inaccuracy then feeds it to contemporary politics. But if I would but if I could respond to the Ethiopian issue.
No, wait, no, I got to answer you that point first. Then you could go to the Ethiopian issue, because that's a big issue too. Mm-hmm. You try to throw over that anti-Semitism slipping right there. Mm-hmm. Even when a Jew disagrees with a Jew, it becomes anti-Semitic. By the way, I hope that you would agree that the common statement in America among Jews is that if your mother is Jewish, then you're Jewish. Would you agree to that?
According to Jewish law,
okay. And I make it better if your father is Jewish and your mother is Jewish, then you're ultra-Jewish.
Excuse me, one's father has nothing to do with the status of Jewish law.
I added that for extra measure.
Right, but that has no
I didn't say it does. I didn't say it does. Don't be peculiar. I mean, we're dealing with the issue. I said, well, okay, my mother is, and so that makes me yes. That makes me.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So then to call me anti-Semitic as a Jew practicing, went through all the rituals like the lady who probably did on yourself, then it would mean that I strongly disagree with the teachings that what you just stated, for example. Then I said to you, using the Torah itself, on the statement of the Torah that Abraham came from the city of Ur in the nation of Chaldea, which was at the time, since we're using by history, ruled by Africans, a joint army that went all the way to India. Now you said scholars. There's only one scholar that made that remark that I know of, and that's the one from the Stern Institute over there in Lexington Avenue. Now, secondly, there may be continuation of those scholars coming out of European context. What you fail to understand, Rabbi, is that European Jews are Europeans and think as Europeans and act as Europeans. African Jews, on the other hand, are being asked not to act as Africans and an African Jewish scholar, African scholarship. And thus you're telling me with the scholars. Now let me go.
All right, are you finished addressing his
No, the
point?
last part of
you
his
got more?
point.
All right.
Last part of his point. The period of time in which we're speaking, and unfortunately Torah doesn't give dates, but the period of time in which we're talking about Avram or Abraham isn't born until around 1775 BCE, before the Christian era. That would put him around the 13th century, 13th dynasty, Egyptian 13th dynasty, Ethiopian 13th, the dynasty of the Nile Valley as a whole, because it's not only Egypt. Egypt is the zenith of a culture that goes way back, because the ancient Egyptians themselves said, we came from the beginning of the Nile where God happy dwell. All of those things. For instance, look, Rabbi, the myth that the Jews built the pyramids. You know that's a myth. Yet it's taught, probably you say it yourself. Koch gets up there and he goes and stands up on the pyramid. Begin gets it up there. And you know pretty well that the last pyramid was built before the birth of the first Jew, Abraham. Now, if I say that, I'll be anti-Semitic. My point is this, that a nation that said we don't exist, you know, with the contrition of Israel, the thousands upon thousands of Israelis leaving Israel constantly, you need to replenish that community. You have an Arab situation, and don't deal with me about the third world, because I'm not a member of the third world, I'm a member of the first world. You know, Zanzibar's voice was long before Adam and Eve, and it's found in Africa. Lucy is found in Ethiopia, and it's 3.2 million years. You see, you want me to go along with a dialogue that suits you as a European Jew, but doesn't suit me as an African Jew. And you assume that my African Jewishness should supersede my Africanness. No way, Rabbi, because you want it both ways. You want to be a European Jew, benefiting from being a European, benefiting from being a Jew, and that I sat by and listened to it, and then call it anti-Semitic.
You may have difficulty, but the record will show that I sit here as an American Jew.
That's right.
That will be my definition.
I sit here as an African
how
Jew.
You